Thank you again for joining me. My name is Hadram, and we are going to do another card review. This will be number 10, so we're about to wrap this up since we just had the live stream today. So I'm going to go through these cards as fast as I can. Ready? And here we go with the first one. Webweave, 5 mana druid minion spell. Summons 2 minions with poisonous. Now, these two, they're spiders, so they're beasts. So summon 2 1/2 poisonous spiders. How good is that really? Is that really worth 5 mana? If you had 2 minions with poisonous, I think if each of those minions were individually, they would probably be worth about maybe, I don't know, I think it'd probably be statted about 2 mana for each of them, like a 2 mana 1/2 with poisonous. So since we already have that in the game with the gastropod, but that gastropod also has taunt, which is a very big deal. So summoning 2 1/2 poisonous spiders for 5 mana seems very pricey. However, they are poisonous, so they can trade up with just about everything. So in the minion trading game, they pretty much have infinite damage, and because they don't have taunt, actually is kind of significant. For one thing, if you play them by themselves, they're just very weak to AoE. But if you put them behind another minion with taunt, which Druid has a lot of access to now with the new expansion, they're actually fairly dangerous. So they can pretty much wipe out your board by themselves, just by hitting something that's even slightly bigger than them. And then you also have to worry about the taunt minion they put them behind. So that's actually pretty influential. So it might actually be a little, yeah, it's definitely much to cost us at 5, but it may actually be fair enough if you have it behind a taunt that you already have. So, but in the late game or against another control deck that's trying to clear your board out all at once, it's kind of a slow play, kind of a weak play, but it may have some impact. I actually kind of like the idea behind the card. It's just not very powerful, but there could be some really good potential for it. Breath of Sindragosa is a 1 mana mage spell. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion and freeze it. So I kind of think this is weaker than Frostbolt. Uh, for the not the idea that it actually costs 1 less mana, which is essentially half the mana cost, but the fact that it has a random minion that you have to target kind of makes a big deal. You can't go face, so I think Frostbolt in that regard is much more powerful since it also can have some of that additional burn value. But it is a pretty good value card. It kind of reminds me of the Arcane Blast, which Mage had, that was 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion. But if you had spell damage, it did double. It gains double value from spell damage. So this is more of a control, not much of a tempo card. And when you're playing a control game, you definitely don't want to have the random effect tagged onto it. So it is pretty cool, but I don't really think it'll see much play. It's just kind of not strong enough. Frozen Clone, good pun on the expansion there. 3 mana secret for Mage. After your opponent plays a minion, add 2 copies of it to your hand. So this is kind of similar to how Mirror Entity already works, in that you basically get copies of minions. But I really think it's kind of more like Duplicate. And Duplicate was a 3 mana spell for Mage. A secret that whenever a friendly minion died, you get 2 copies of it in your hand. So this is a little bit more proactive, but your opponent can kind of choose what minions you get. There are some minions that you would rather have in your hand than on the board. For instance, if they're like Battlecry minions, such as Babbling Book. You know, if you were trying to break a secret with Mirror Entity, or if you're trying to break your opponent's Mirror Entity, you would want to play Babbling Book. But you do not want to play your Babbling Book against this card. So it does have a little bit of counterplay there. The opponent can actually take advantage of 2 battle cries from the same minion that you just played, instead of just a weak body on the board. So that's a trade-off. But overall, it's probably really good for the tempo game, not really all that great for the control game, since you really want to be specific about the cards that you want to play. But it may even replace Mirror Entity in a lot of those tempo decks, or be played alongside with it, since you want to play as many secrets as possible because you have the new Secret Synergies cards. So it's actually pretty fair, and I kind of like it, but then again, I have this bane about secrets from Mage, so it's just 1 more thing to play around. Overall, it's a pretty good card, though. Shadow Essence, 6 mana, summon a 5/5 copy of a random minion in your deck. Now, for Priest, you're looking to basically play out something from your deck that is very strong on the board without having a battle cry. It's kind of the same thing as Free from Amber, but you're getting a 2 mana discount on a weaker body overall, but it's more targeted. I say targeted. You can control the outcome by thinning out your deck, or by only putting certain minions in your deck, but it is random still. So this could also summon a stronger version of a weaker minion in your deck, such as the Oracle. If instead of just a 1/1 elemental, it's a 5/5. So that could be pretty powerful. This is another way to activate your resurrection effects. So yeah, I think it's all right. I just don't see it being used too often because it's too random. You can definitely run very few minions in your deck, but if you have no minions in your deck when you play it, it's not going to be all that strong. It does have synergy with Lyra, but you're looking to play something a little bit more powerful and faster on turn 6 as a priest and not rely so much on RNG, so maybe it's not that great. Speaking of cards that are not that great, Wailing Felhound. Oh my gosh, is this a meme card? 3 mana, 3/6 demon for Warlocks, so it's overstated for its mana cost. But whenever it takes damage, discard a random card. So this card is kind of bad in the sense that it has it's kind of like the Acolyte of Pain effect, where when the Acolyte of Pain takes damage, you draw a card. Well, when this thing takes damage, you lose a card. So it's worse, but it's better statted. It literally has triple the attack and double the health. So this is also probably the only real function of this card is to either play it on a board where your opponent has very few minions or has no real way of dealing with it, or you play it with Treachery. So that way you can force your opponent to get a 3/6. Yes, you have to take 3 damage every turn, but the more damage you deal to it, the more resources you can remove from your opponent, which could be pretty influential, but honestly, that's just kind of an excuse to play the card. I think it's kind of bad. It's actually probably the worst card in the set. But when you really think about it, if you play the Felhound, Lakari Felhound, which is 4 mana, 3/8, you're discarding 2 cards right away. Well, realistically, this thing is going to discard somewhere between 2, maybe 3 cards if your opponent has a bunch of minions with 2 attack or 3 attack. This is probably going to get countered pretty hard by like the Warriors, which are using a bunch of Whirlwind effects in this meta, or with the new cards that are coming out. So it's possible that this could actually be very bad to play, just overall. If you're losing at least 2 cards, this card is kind of like on the borderline of being playable and not playable. And if you lose any more than that, it's definitely going to be bad for you. So good luck with this card. You're going to need it. Rotface, the Warrior Legendary. Surprisingly, it's not Sourfang. So 8 mana, 4/6. It's really bad stats for its mana cost, but its effect is actually pretty legendary. Whenever this minion survives damage, you summon a random legendary minion. So this is actually really cool to work with the damage your own stuff, because instead of getting just a random like 2/2 Ghoul that's not very powerful, you can actually get a legendary that could be pretty powerful, like Ragnaros, for instance. You can also get cards like Illidan Stormrage, which can summon up more guys for your board. You can get control cards. You can even get any new legendary that comes out. A lot of them have taunt, so you can actually get some legendaries with taunt, like the Curator, like Tyrion Fordring from it. It's not necessarily class specific. It's not necessarily expansion specific. So you can get pretty much a wide variety of cards. You could also get cards like Lorewalker Cho, Nat Pagal with this effect too. So just remember that there are some low rolls that could be pretty much of a downer. Shifter Xeris in this kind of regard. But it is a really cool card to work with the concept of damage your own guys and get cool stuff. So I think it's pretty cool. Happy Ghoul. Look at him. 3 mana, 3/3. It costs 0 if your hero was healed this turn. Holy crap. So we have an excuse to run Lifesteal in an aggressive deck. So if this card costs 0, it's basically the same thing as Silverware Golem for a discard Warlock, right? So if you hit the roll on the discard, you get to summon a free 3/3 from your hand. So this does exactly the same thing. It costs 0 if you get healed. So if you have a lifesteal card, which is most likely for a lot of classes now, you get the heal, and you get to play a free 3/3 on your turn. So that's actually a very fast play to make, since you just played a minion or played a spell that had lifesteal, and then you played a 3/3 as well as heal all the damage that was just done to you. So yeah, this is a amazing card, and it's also quite hilarious. I actually think this might even be a little problematic, because if you have 2 of these in your hand, you just played a 0 mana 6/6 just by healing your hero. Aggressive Priest is definitely a thing with this card, so you might actually see something along the lines of a Priest deck that may actually work. Any card like the new Paladin card that has charge and lifesteal. You charge, you heal your hero, and then you play Happy Ghoul. You just summoned a 3/2 and a 3/3 for 4 mana. That's pretty good. To note, the effect does not work if your hero's already at full health. You have to actually heal through damage that your hero has taken in order for this card to work. Now, some classes can do that with weapons. Some classes can do that with self-inflicting abilities like the Warlock hero power. And generally, this is just going to be a very fast play when you have a heal. So it's a proactive play on a very reactive kind of effect. So it's really good. The next card is Rattling Rascal. It's a 4 mana 2/2 that summons a 5/5. But when it dies, it summons a 5/5 for your opponent. So they're really hardcore going on to that 4 mana 7/7 meme. That's really going on. The guy is also cute too. Yeah, look at him. He's got his little sword. So he's a small body by himself. It kind of reminds me of the Big Time Racketeer from the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. He's a 6 mana 1/1, but he summons a 6/6. But the downside is that, well, for one, this card's much cheaper, 2 mana cheaper for just to have 1/1 from the summoned minion be put on this one. So a 2/2 and a 5/5 versus a 1/1 and a 6/6 is much better as far as stat distribution goes, and it's cheaper, so it's really powerful. The downside is that when your opponent kills this, it summons a 5/5 skeleton for them. Well, here's the thing about that, is that you actually get the upside of summoning the 5/5 for yourself, so you can actually be more proactive with the minion. And if your opponent's more likely going to kill the Rascal before they kill the 5/5, because of the health. So they may actually just summon a 5/5 for themselves, and in that regard, you just trade your 5/5 into theirs, and nothing. And the only thing that's done is that you played a 4 mana minion, and you've used up one of your opponent's removals doing so. So in the end, you end up coming out on top for the most part. But if that doesn't happen, you can actually run away with this card pretty quickly. And that's actually pretty good. That's pretty cool. You can also use effects like Treachery. You can use things that you can take advantage of having the 5/5 for yourself. And this is actually kind of pretty cool if you happen to have extra synergies with summoning minions or buffing minions, or silence effects maybe. But it's actually just a pretty cool minion altogether, and I actually think it would actually see some pretty good play. You get a free 5/5 for 4 mana, that with the condition of having a 5/5 for your opponent, but you may also run cards that can control your opponent's board in that way to just kill off a 5/5. So you get the free minion that your opponent has to still trade into. So really good. Saronite Chain Gang. I really think they could have come up with a different name for this card, but this is kind of reminiscent of the quest that's in World of Warcraft, so I guess that's kind of appropriate. 4 mana 2/3 Taunt. We have one already in the game. It's not seeing much play, even because it has a Death Rattle that summons a 2/2. Even in Azoth decks, it's getting cut a lot. So not a very good stat line, but the Battlecry summons another one. So the Battlecry that summons a 2/3, it's actually very much like Spirit Wolves for Shaman, which is only a 1 mana. It's only 1 mana more, but it's a neutral. So if there were classes that can take advantage of summoning many different taunts in one turn, or using it's basically a 4 mana 4/6 with taunt, but it's actually more like a 4 mana 2/6 because the 2 attack value doesn't calculate that way. But yeah, it might actually be an okay card to play with decks that like summoning other things and decks that have things like Evolve. Um, 4 mana 2/3 is also, speaking of Evolve, it's also like the Jade Spirit, which summons a Jade Golem. And on average, if a Jade Golem that from the Spirit summons is like a 3/3 on average, then it's okay. It's actually pretty good. But those decks tend to have synergies with Jades, and summoning other minions, and the Jades could actually get more powerful over time. This card gets a better overall minion at the start, but it doesn't really prove to be any good in the late game, except to just stall out for a little extra time. Overall, I think the card has some good flavor, and like I said, Evolve could actually make the minion quite impactful since it evolves into a 5 or a 6 if you have the Shaman hero, Death Knight hero. So yeah, it's actually pretty. I think it's actually worth checking out and trying to play around with. And the last card in this review will be Bone Drake. It's a 6 mana 6/5 dragon. So this is the third dragon we've seen in this expansion revealed so far, the second neutral dragon. So they've gone a little bit more in this regard. The Death Rattle effect adds a random dragon to your hand. So a 6 mana 6/5 is very underwhelming for stats. But as a Death Rattle to add a random dragon to your hand, it's pretty much got a scope of either summoning something that's big or something that can impact the board right away. Anything from a Alexstrasza to Sindragosa, you can get quite a many of the. You can even get the Secret Agent coming through card from this one. So this card definitely wants to be played in a dragon-themed deck, but it doesn't necessarily only get played in those types of decks. You could even put it in just a Death Rattle deck. A 6 mana 6/5 is better than a 6 mana 4/5, so it might actually replace Karen Bloodhoof in those decks. But you don't get the body right away. But the average dragon that you put in your hand from that card is actually better than a 4/5 minion on average. So you might actually end up walking out with another Bone Drake, for instance, and you can just have infinite Bone Drakeception. So there you go. That could work. But a really interesting card, and this is actually one of my favorite mounts in World of Warcraft, so I actually really want to play this card in just about every deck I can think of. And that's going to be it for this review. I hope you liked it. Like and subscribe to my videos. I will actually have my last review before the final wrap, just after this one. So stay tuned, and we will see you again next time. Hope you enjoy. Take care.